If you had told me a few years ago that I've been sitting here feeling disappointed about only having read 5 books so far in 2025, I would have laughed. Because for most of my life, reading 5 books in a year would have been an achievement. But here I am, feeling like I'm falling behind, and I feel it's all because of Booktube. Now, don't get me wrong, Booktube has been one of the greatest things to happen to my reading life. It has helped me fall in love with books again. It took me from reading around 5 books a year to over 50 and gave me a community of people who share the same passion for stories. But at the same time, it has also completely warped my perception of what's normal when it comes to reading. And now I want to talk about how that happened, why I'm feeling like I'm failing, and what I'm going to do about it. So before I discovered Booktube, I was like a lot of people. I loved reading, but it wasn't something I did all the time. I mean, I'll pick up a book every now and then, maybe finish it in a few days or weeks or months, and then I would often go months without reading anything. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy books, I just never really thought of reading as a habit. It felt like something I did when I felt like it. But then I found Booktube and everything changed. I mean, once I started watching people talk about books with so much passion, it made me realize I could be reading way more than I was. So instead of mindlessly scrolling on my phone before bed, I actually started picking up a book instead. And instead of treating reading as something I only did when I had free time, I started making time for it, just like I would do for watching a show or watching a football game, for example. And it wasn't just about reading more, it was also about choosing to spend my time differently. And I can confidently say that this shift has completely changed my relationship with books. Before Booktube, I mostly read whatever was popular at the time or stuck to the same few authors I already knew. But Booktube has opened up an entire world of books I never would have found on my own. And that's amazing. I've discovered hidden gems, underrated series, and authors I've never even heard about. And then I've also learned about loads of different fantasy subgenres, classic fantasy, for example, that I missed. And I also found books that have challenged my usual tastes. And my reading taste has expanded so much because I was no longer just relying on bestseller lists or a friend's recommendation, for example. I was getting recommendations from people who genuinely loved these books. And that completely changed the way I was reading. Obviously, reading has always been seen as a solitary activity, and in a way, it is, it's just you, the book, and your imagination. But Booktube made reading feel social for the first time ever. Seeing people geek out over their favorite books made reading feel exciting rather than you just doing something totally alone. Instead of you finishing a book or myself and moving on, I could now hear different perspectives, discussions, and debates about it. Booktube has made me feel like I'm part of something bigger, a community where people actually cared about the books in the same way I did. And before I knew it, my reading went from a casual hobby to a full blown passion. And I'm actually really grateful for that. And thanks to Booktube, I went from reading around 5 books a year, as I mentioned earlier, to over 50, something I never thought I would be able to ever do. And reading also became more than just a hobby. It has almost become a part of my identity, if that makes any sense. And honestly, that's been one of the greatest things to happen in my life. But then 2025 happened. This year started with my wife and I traveling in New Zealand, Australia, and Malaysia, and it was amazing. But the weird thing is that I actually barely read during my travels. Then, for the first part of the year, life has just been relentlessly busy and very stressful. As some of you might know, Susanna is pregnant, which is amazing, and we thank God for that blessing. But it also means a drastic life change is about to happen for us. At the time of recording this video, we're also buying our first home and we're going to be moving soon. I'm also nearing the end of my project management qualification. I am also prepping for exams for that reason. And then I'm also prepping for a potential job interview. Oh, and I also have a YouTube channel I'm running. I have friends, I have family, I have church. And all this came together at the same time. And suddenly, for the first time in years, I found myself struggling to read. I wasn't picking up books as often, and even when I did, I felt disconnected. I also feel like if you are crazy busy as I've been, then it's also worth trying to think about how you can potentially outsource or simplify things in your life. For example, if you're like me and you're managing your own business, then it can be very overwhelming to try and figure out how to create your own website. And if that's you, then having an all-in-one website is crucial, which brings me to today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs and those looking to build their brand and business online. Whether you've been in the entrepreneur game for a long time, you're just starting, or maybe you're just trying to manage a growing brand, Squarespace makes it so incredibly easy to create exquisite websites while simultaneously allowing you to engage with your audience and to sell whatever kind of content and or products you may have. It's literally all in one place and is all on your terms. And if you're a little unsure about using Squarespace, do not worry. Squarespace provides every single tool you'll need to create your dream website. They have hundreds of layout options and every single one is customizable with a new design intelligence, which by the way combines 2 decades of industry-leading design expertise with cutting-edge technology. Squarespace will empower you to build a beautiful, personalized and excellently tailored website that will fit your unique needs and original identity. So you can head over to squarespace.com to start your free trial today, and when you're ready to launch your own website, head over to squarespace.com/libraryofaviking to save 10% off your first website. But yeah, when I started reading less than I used to, it felt so weird. I mean, at first I thought something is wrong. I mean, why has my reading slowed down so much? But then I just realized life has gotten really, really busy. And for the first time in a long time, I started feeling like I wasn't reading enough. And this is where things started to get a bit complicated for me. I have read 5 books this year, which most people in my life would be very, very impressed by. So why am I feeling like I'm failing? Before Booktube, if I had read 5 books in a year, I think, wow, that's solid. 5 books is more than most people read, and I would have felt pretty good about it. But now, 5 books feels like nothing. Because after spending so much time in this space where people casually read 100, 150, or even 200 books a year, it's hard not to feel like I'm falling behind. And if you're one of those that reads 100 books a year, nothing against you, I'm incredibly impressed by your reading ability. But you know, Booktube can sometimes be like watching Olympic athletes, for example, that train every single day and then feeling bad that I can't run a marathon. Logically, I know that what they're doing is normal. They're at an extreme level and they build their lives around that goal. But when you're surrounded by it all the time, it starts to feel like that's the standard. And I think that's what's happened with Booktube. I see people who finish 15 books a month as if it's nothing. I see massive TPR piles that I know I could never get through, and even though no one is telling me that I should read more, just being exposed to that level of reading makes it feel like I should be keeping up. And that's where the problem has started, I think. Reading is supposed to be about joy, relaxation, and enrichment, right? It's about getting lost in stories, discovering new ideas, and experiencing different perspectives. It was never supposed to be a competition. And yet, sometimes it starts to feel like one. You know, rap videos make you feel like you're not reading fast enough, or huge TBR lists makes you feel like you should be setting bigger goals, or just the constant exposure to high reading numbers makes you feel like reading more is always better. And that's simply not true. So here's basically what I realized. Reading shouldn't be about numbers. I know it sounds so simple, but really, reading should never be about hitting a quota or keeping up with what other people are doing. Some years you'll read 50 plus books, and that's amazing, and some years you'll read 5. And you know, both of those are okay. The important thing isn't how many books you read, it's whether you're still enjoying the books you do read. And that is where I need to step back and reframe my mindset. So, what am I gonna do about it? As much as I'm able, I will not let Booktube or social media or anyone else define what my reading habits should look like. Instead, I really need to try and reframe how I think about reading and remind myself why I started in the first place. Because at the end of the day, reading should feel fulfilling, not like a chore. So here's how I'm gonna try to shift my mindset. Firstly, I'm just gonna remind myself there is no finish line. No one was going to hand me out a medal for reading 100 books a year, and even if they were, that's not why I'm reading. Whether I read 5 books a year, 50 books a year, or 500 books a year, the goal isn't to rack up a high number, it is to enjoy the books I do read. And the irony is that if I spend all my time worrying about how many books I'm reading, I'm actually taken away from the enjoyment of the books themselves. And obviously, that completely defeats the purpose. You know, right now, my life is filled with huge, important things. As I mentioned, my wife and I are buying a house. I'm preparing for exams and job interviews, which takes up a lot of energy and time. And most importantly, my amazing wife is pregnant and we're about to start a family together. I just need to remind myself, reading will always be there, but some seasons of life are just busier than others, and that's okay. This doesn't mean that I love books any less, it just means that right now I need to give myself grace and recognize that reading has to fit around my life, not the other way around. Just because I'm reading less in this season doesn't mean that I've fallen off. Reading is a lifelong habit, and like anything else, there will be ups and downs. Some months I might read a dozen books, and other months I might read one. And sometimes I might go weeks without picking up a book at all, and that's normal. Because at the end of the day, what matters isn't keeping up with Booktube or hitting some arbitrary goal or feeling like I need to prove myself as a reader. What matters is that when I do read, I actually enjoy it. So if you ever feel like you're not reading enough, I want you to know you're not alone. Booktube is an amazing space that has introduced us to so many incredible books, new genres, and a love for reading we never thought possible. But at the same time, it can also make you feel like you're never reading enough, like you should always be reading faster, reading more, keeping up with latest trends, and so on, and that's just not true. So if you're in a season of life when you're reading less than usual, I just want you to remember this. You're still a reader, you're still engaging with books in your own way, and the number of books you read doesn't define your love for reading. So I would love to hear from you. Have you ever felt like Booktube has warped your perception of normal reading? And also, if you want to know my thoughts on the dangers of success, check out this video.